What does it cost to buy back your own name?
Tell me something, Dae-hyun. What does it cost to buy back your own name? She is sitting in her car outside her parents' house, and she is crying. Not the pretty kind. Not the kind you can fix with a tissue and a compact mirror. The kind that comes from somewhere below your throat, below your chest, from a place you have been keeping locked and bolted for so long that when it finally opens, your whole body is surprised by it. She gives herself 5 minutes. She knows because she sets the timer. That is the kind of woman Adisa Balogun is. Even when she is falling apart in a parking lot in December, she is managing the process. 4 minutes and 58 seconds of crying. 2 seconds to stop. Because inside that house, there is a dinner she funded, a table she dressed, a meal she cooked at 4 in the morning, and a family waiting to consume all of it without once looking at her face. She checks the mirror. She fixes nothing. She gets out of the car. Now imagine sitting at that table, the one you paid for, in a chair you reupholstered, under a chandelier you selected from a catalog at midnight because your mother said the old one looked cheap. The candles are ivory, unscented, $60 for a box of 12. The tablecloth is Belgian linen. You ironed it yourself this morning at 6 a.m. because the housekeeper you also pay called in sick. You are sitting at this table. You are eating the food you cooked. And your father just stood up to make a toast to your brother David for holding this family together through another year. Nobody looks at you. Not once. Your wine glass is still full because your hand has not moved in 4 minutes. You are not crying anymore. You are not sad. You are not angry. You are doing what you always do. You are calculating. Specifically, you are calculating exactly how many years, how many wire transfers, how many silent Sunday afternoons it took to become a ghost in a house that runs entirely on your blood. The answer, it turns out, is 10. My name is Adisa Balogun. I find money that people try to hide. I have spent a decade being very good at it. Good enough that people with everything to lose trust me with their worst secrets, their buried accounts, their paper trails that were never supposed to be found. What I didn't see coming, what no amount of training prepares you for, is the moment you realize the person you have been protecting most is the one who has been burying you. For 10 years, I fixed their mistakes, cleared their debts, kept their name clean when it should have been dragged. I told myself it was love. Tonight, sitting at this table, watching my father raise a glass I paid for to a brother who has never once asked if I was okay, tonight I finally understood what it actually was. It was a habit. And habits, unlike people, can be broken. What they didn't know, what nobody sitting at that table knew, is that 6 months ago I made a decision, and 3 months ago I made a phone call. The man on the other end of that call is named Dae-hyun. He doesn't raise his voice. He has never needed to. By the time this dinner ends, the Balogun name will mean something entirely different. And I will be somewhere they cannot reach me. Before we get into how Adisa's night changes everything, if you have ever poured everything you had into people who treated you like a service and not a daughter, hit that like button right now and subscribe to Christy J's story. Every single like helps me keep telling stories like this one. Okay, let's go. 6 months earlier, Adisa's office, late on a Wednesday. The building is mostly empty by 8 p.m. She prefers it this way. The particular quality of silence that settles into an office after everyone who works for appearances has gone home. The hum of the HVAC. The faint smell of cold coffee from a mug she forgot to finish 3 hours ago. The blue-white glow of 2 monitors, and Adisa, inside a set of international accounts that she has been moving through with the focused patience of someone who has all night and knows it. She finds it at 9:47 p.m. Not fraud. Not quite. A structural gap. The kind that looks like a clerical oversight to most eyes, but reads, to her eyes, like a door left deliberately ajar. She has seen manufactured gaps before. She knows the difference between a mistake and a choice. This is a choice. Left open another 90 days, and it triggers an automatic federal review, the kind that doesn't ask permission and doesn't stop once it starts. The account belongs to a man named Dae-hyun. She has heard the name. Everyone in her field has heard the name. You don't spend a decade doing high-level forensic accounting in Chicago without learning which names carry a weight that has nothing to do with the balance sheet. Standard protocol is clear. File the flag, step away, let the regulators handle it. She opens the form. She fills in the first two fields. She stares at the cursor blinking in the third. She closes the form. She sits for 11 minutes. She counts them the way she counts things when her brain needs something small and certain to hold on to. And then she does something she has never done in 10 years of practice. She engineers a restructure. Legitimate, untraceable to anything except professional diligence. She works until midnight, the cold coffee forgotten, the city outside her window going quiet, floor by floor. She closes the gap, files it under a compliance review code that, as a matter of regulatory procedure, permanently links their firms in the Federal Registry. She doesn't think about that part. Not fully. Not yet. She drives home. She makes tea, the strong, dark kind she makes when something is sitting in her chest that she hasn't named yet. She stands at her kitchen window and looks at the Chicago skyline and feels, for reasons she cannot immediately explain, that she has just made a decision that had nothing to do with accounting. She sleeps better than she has in months. The call comes on a Sunday afternoon. It always comes on a Sunday afternoon. Her brother David needs a bridge investment, $47,000. Her father delivers it the way he always delivers these things, gently, reasonably, wrapped in the language of family and opportunity, and you know how David is. He just needs a runway, and who better than his sister who understands money? Adisa holds the phone against her ear and looks out of her apartment window at the gray December lake and says nothing for long enough that her father asks if she is still there. She is still there. She is always still there. That has been the entire problem. That night, she opens a folder on her laptop, password protected, labeled simply, Receipts. She started it 6 years ago on a Tuesday evening after paying a bill she had not been asked about, simply informed of. She has updated it every time since. Every transfer. Every loan that was never repaid and never meant to be. Every school fee, every legal retainer, every credit card statement quietly absorbed. Each entry has a date, an amount, and, because she is a forensic accountant and cannot help herself, the exact words that were used to ask. She adds the new entry. She runs the total. The number at the bottom of the column has 6 figures. It has had 6 figures for 2 years. She has never shown it to another living person. She closes the laptop. She sits in the dark of her apartment for a long time, in the specific silence of a woman who is doing mathematics that has nothing to do with money. Then she opens her work email. She searches a name, Dae-hyun. She finds his firm. She reads everything that is publicly available, which is not much because men like him are deliberate about what they allow to be public. What she finds is enough to tell her what kind of man he is. She closes the tab. She goes to bed. But for the next 5 days, the same thought follows her. Through client meetings, through her commute, through Sunday dinner at her parents' house, where she cooks and serves and clears without being asked to, and without being thanked. A man that careful doesn't make structural errors. He left that gap open on purpose. And the question she cannot shake, the one she turns over and over, like a stone that keeps showing a different color, is why. He finds her first. A hand-delivered envelope arrives at her office on a Tuesday morning. Her work address, not her home. She notes that immediately. Her home address is not difficult to locate for someone with his resources, which means the choice to use her professional address was deliberate. A message inside a message, and she receives it clearly. Inside, one card. Heavy cream stock, no logo, no embellishment. His direct number. On the reverse, in handwriting that is small and unhurried and precise, "You closed a door that would have cost me significantly. I don't leave debts open." She waits 2 days before she calls, not because she is afraid, because she wants to be honest with herself about why she is calling. And it takes her 2 full days to admit that her reasons are not entirely professional. They meet at a private members club in the West Loop, the kind of place where the lighting is low and considered, and the staff have confidentiality agreements, and the rooms absorb conversations without reflecting them. He is already seated when she arrives. He stands when she enters. Something about it stops her for half a second. Not the gesture itself. She has had doors held and chairs pulled and all the minor performances of courtesy. This is different. He stands the way people stand when they mean it. Like her arrival in the room is an event worth acknowledging. She files it. She sits down. She orders water. He thanks her for the restructure, the way that people with real authority give thanks. Not as a transaction, not as a preamble to something else, but as a plain and complete statement of fact. She tells him it was a compliance reflex. He looks at her for a moment, with an expression she will spend the next 3 months learning to read, and says, "People with compliance reflexes file the flag and go home. You stayed until midnight and restructured the entire position. That is not a reflex. That is a choice. I'd like to understand what made you choose it." She doesn't answer immediately, but she doesn't look away. They talk for 2 hours. He asks questions the way he appears to do everything, precisely, without waste, each one landing in exactly the place it was aimed. He listens to her answers the way almost nobody listens, without assembling his response while she is still speaking, without the particular impatience of someone waiting for their turn. He is simply there, fully, completely there. And she realizes, somewhere in the second hour, that she cannot remember the last time another person was fully present with her. Not her family, not her colleagues, not anyone. On the walk to her car, her phone buzzes. Her father. Asking about the David transfer. Asking if she has had a chance to move on it. She looks at the notification. She puts the phone back in her coat pocket. She does not reply. For the first time in 10 years, the habit hesitates. The morning of the Christmas dinner, 7 a.m. Her phone rings before her alarm. Her mother. The call lasts 22 minutes. Adisa stands in her kitchen in her robe, one hand around a mug of tea that goes cold while she listens. Her mother covers, her weight, her hair, the dress she has told her mother she is planning to wear. The way she always looks like she has come directly from the office, even when she hasn't. The impression this creates among the family's social circle. How Adisa should consider, just consider, that appearances matter more than she seems to appreciate. And then, arriving at the end of the list, the way the sharpest things always arrive, quietly, after you have already lowered your guard. The dress. The burgundy one, the structured one with the clean lines that hits below the knee. The one that, when Adisa puts it on, makes her look exactly like what she is. A woman who has built something, who knows her own dimensions, who takes up space on purpose. It is wrong, too severe. It sends the wrong message. A replacement has already been ordered. Adisa's mother has already done this, already decided, already acted, and delivered to the concierge of Adisa's building. A softer cut, blush-toned, 2 sizes smaller than Adisa wears because, her mother says in the tone she uses for obvious things, it will give her something to work toward. Adisa says, "Thank you, Mum." She hangs up. She stands in her kitchen. The tea is cold. Outside, Chicago is the particular gray of December mornings that feel like the city is holding its breath. She looks at the garment bag from the concierge sitting on her entry chair. Then she opens her wardrobe. She takes out the burgundy dress. She puts it on. She stands in front of her mirror for 3 full seconds and looks at herself. Really looks, the way she rarely allows herself to in the morning when there is too much to do and too little time for anything that isn't functional. She looks like herself. She picks up her keys. She drives to her parents' house to begin cooking at 8 a.m. Somewhere on the outer drive, in the gray morning light off the lake, she finds herself thinking about a man who stood when she walked into a room, about the way he listened, about the specific feeling of being looked at by someone who is not calculating what you are worth to them. She doesn't decide what that means yet, but she stops trying to put it away. She lets it sit in the passenger seat for the rest of the drive, quiet and warm, like something that belongs there. She arrives. She ties on an apron. She begins. 8 hours. That is what the Balogun Christmas table costs. Not in dollars, though it costs in those too. Every canapé and every course, and the good wine she selected, and the flowers she ordered, and the extra housekeeper she paid for, who called in sick so that the tablecloth this morning was Adisa's hands and an iron at 6 a.m. It costs 8 hours of standing on marble floors in a kitchen that belongs to her mother and was renovated with Adisa's money, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who has made peace with doing her best work in rooms where no one is watching. The smell of it fills the whole house by 5 p.m., roasted garlic and good stock and something sweet from the dessert she is finishing in stages, the one that requires the blowtorch and exact timing and a steady hand. She has a steady hand. She has always had a steady hand. It is the thing about her that nobody in this family has ever thought to comment on. The guests arrive at 7. The table fills. Her crystal catches the candlelight. Her candles, her flowers, her tablecloth pressed to a crease so sharp it could serve as a straight edge. Near the end of the first course, a woman in a cream blouse near the far end of the table takes a bite and goes still for a moment, the way people go still when something surprises them into silence. "This is extraordinary," she says. She looks at her husband. She looks back at her plate. Who on earth catered? Adisa is in the kitchen. The serving door is open 4 inches. She hears the question clearly, the way she has always heard everything from the edges of rooms she was not invited into. She hears her mother's answer. "We have a wonderful restaurant on Michigan Avenue. They've been doing our family events for years. Incredible team." Adisa stands at the counter. She has a serving spoon in her hand. She sets it down on the steel surface and it makes a small, clean sound in the quiet kitchen. She picks it back up. She plates the next course. She carries it out. She moves through the dining room the way she has always moved through this family. Present, essential, invisible. Furniture that thinks. A fixture that funds. Her brother David catches her eye from across the table. He gives her the smile, the small, practiced one, the one that says, "I know," and "I'm sorry," and also, "Please don't make this difficult." The smile of a man who made his peace with the arrangement a long time ago and has decided, on her behalf, that she should make hers. She looks away first. Under the table, in the pocket of her burgundy dress, her phone is face down and silent. She has not looked at it since she arrived. She will not look at it yet. But she knows the number by heart now. The way you know the address of somewhere that has quietly, without announcement, started to feel more like home than the house you grew up in. Have you ever given so much of yourself to people that you forgot what it felt like to keep something, anything, just for you? Tell me your story in the comments right now, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. I read every single one. Let's keep going. Her father pulls her into his study between the third and fourth course. He closes the door. The sound of the dinner disappears behind it. The crystal, the laughter, David's voice carrying above everything the way it always has. Her father doesn't sit. He stands with his hands clasped behind his back, the posture he has always used for conversations that have already been decided before they begin. And he tells her about David's situation without once meeting her eyes. A federal audit. Financial irregularities across 3 accounts. Exposure that, if it surfaces publicly, reaches the entire family. He needs $200,000 moved by Monday morning. Clean. Quiet. Routed through Adisa's professional accounts because her structure makes it defensible. Because her name, her decade of careful professional reputation, makes it look legitimate. You're the one with the tools, he says. That is what this family built those tools for. Adisa looks at her father. This man she has loved her entire life. This man who once, when she was 9 years old and came home from school with a hole in her coat from where a girl had grabbed her in the corridor, sat with her on the front steps in the cold for an hour and said, "Nobody gets to put their hands on you. Nobody. Do you understand me? Not ever." She had believed him completely. She had carried that hour with her for 30 years like something precious. She looks at him now and she understands, with a clarity that does not feel like anger, that feels instead like a door opening onto a room she has always known was there but refused to enter, that the man on those steps and the man standing in this study are not in conflict with each other. They are the same man. A man who loves his children in a hierarchy she was never at the top of. A man who taught her she deserved protection and then spent 30 years being the one she needed protecting from. She opens her bag. Her fingers find her checkbook. The pen is in her hand. She holds it for 11 seconds. She counts every one the way she has always counted things, quietly, precisely, alone. This is the version of herself she has been trying to retire, the one who absorbs and adjusts and pays and stays, the one who has confused obligation with love for so long that she stopped being able to locate the difference. The one who has a folder on her laptop labeled receipts with a 6-figure total that she has shown to no one because showing it would mean saying out loud what it means. 11 seconds. She places the pen on her father's desk. She picks up her coat. She looks at him one more time, not with hatred, not even with hurt, with something quieter and more permanent than either. "I'm going to need you to find another tool," she says. She says it the way you say something you have been practicing without knowing you were practicing it. The way words come out when they have finally finished forming. She walks out of the study. She does not go back to the table. She does not say goodbye to anyone. She walks through the hallway, past the coat rack that holds a coat she bought her mother 2 Christmases ago, past the console table she sourced from an estate sale because her mother wanted something that looked old and important, past 10 years of herself layered into every corner of a house that has never once felt like hers, and out the front door. The Chicago December receives her without comment. Just cold air and the particular stillness of a residential street at 9 p.m. The muffled sound of the dinner continuing behind the closed door, her brother's laugh rising above everything one last time, and Adisa standing on the front step in her burgundy dress with her coat open because she forgot to button it and cannot find the reason to care. She has been carrying something for 10 years. She can feel, right now, the exact weight of it. The way you only feel the weight of something at the moment you finally put it down. She takes out her phone. She calls. He answers before the second ring. No greeting, just presence. The particular quality of his silence that she has learned means, I am here. Take whatever time you need. She says, I need you to activate it. He says, it started the moment you walked out the door. She understands it then, fully, for the first time, all at once. The compliance link. The one she created 6 months ago at midnight with cold coffee and the city going quiet around her, filed under a code that permanently connected their firms in the Federal Registry. She had access to his financial architecture, and he, because she had spent the following months quietly, methodically, without ever quite saying to herself what she was doing, had full legal access to the Balogun financial trail. Every account, every transfer, every entry in a folder labeled receipts that she had never shown another living person. He had been ready for 6 months. He had simply been waiting for her to be ready too. You knew, she says. It is not an accusation. It is a recognition. The difference between those two things is everything. I knew you would get here, he says. I didn't know when. She stands in the cold for another minute. She doesn't speak, and he doesn't fill the silence because he has learned, or perhaps he has always known, that some silences are not empty. Some silences are a person arriving somewhere they have needed to be for a very long time. The cold is sharp against her face. She doesn't move. She lets it be sharp. She lets herself stand in it, in the December dark outside a house full of people who never once asked what she needed. And she breathes. Thank you, she says finally, for waiting. He doesn't answer right away. When he does, his voice is quiet, steadier than anything she has held in years. Don't thank me for that, he says. That was the easiest thing I've ever done. She closes her eyes. She stays on the line until she is ready to go. By midnight, the Balogun accounts are frozen. By morning, the federal audit David had been trying to bury with her money and her name is active, fed by the compliance trail she built 6 months ago without fully understanding that she was building it. Her lawyer, a name Dae-hyun had passed to her 6 weeks earlier with no explanation beyond, keep this, receives the receipts file at 1:13 a.m., and by 7 a.m. has begun constructing a civil case for financial coercion spanning a decade. Adisa is in her apartment. She is packed. Her flight to Atlanta leaves at 6. She is, for the first time in 10 years, not staying. She is sitting at her kitchen table in the specific stillness of a person who has done something irreversible and is learning the particular texture of that feeling. Not regret, not relief exactly, but something in between that she doesn't have a word for yet. When her phone buzzes at 1:47 a.m., not her father, not her mother, not David. A name she has not seen in 11 years. Dr. John Balogun, uncle, her father's younger brother, the one who left before Adisa was old enough to understand why, the one whose name was spoken in that house only as a warning, as an example of what happened to people who chose themselves over the family. The one she had asked about once, at 12 years old, and been told, John made his choices. We don't discuss John. She opens the message. It is 5 sentences. I know what you did tonight. I have been watching your father do this to people for 30 years. Starting with our mother, then our sisters, then you. I am the reason the federal audit was already open before Dae-hyun filed anything. I opened it 8 months ago. I am sorry it took me this long to find my way back to you. Adisa reads it once, twice, a third time. She sets the phone down on the table very carefully, the way you set down something that might break. She sits with it for a long time. Outside, Chicago is doing what Chicago does at 2 a.m. in December. Cold and indifferent and vast and completely unbothered by the things that are ending and beginning inside the apartment stacked above its streets. Then she picks the phone back up because she is a forensic accountant and she cannot sit with incomplete information. And she starts to understand, piece by piece, the way a case resolves, the way a trail that seemed to lead nowhere suddenly turns and shows you the whole picture, what the message means. The gap in Dae-hyun's accounts, the structural irregularity she found at 9:47 p.m. on a Wednesday 6 months ago that looked like an oversight, but read, to her, like a door left deliberately ajar. It wasn't Dae-hyun's door. Uncle John put it there. He put it there knowing exactly whose desk it would land on. He had been watching her career for years, from a distance, without contact, the way you watch someone you love from a place you are not allowed to be. He knew how she worked. He knew that she would not file the flag. He knew that her instinct, her specific and particular professional instinct, would lead her to fix it rather than report it, to connect herself to the case, to pull herself into the orbit of the one man in Chicago with the resources and the motivation and the character to stand between her and what was coming. John could not choose freedom for her. He had learned that lesson 30 years ago when he tried to fight the family's financial coercion head-on and lost everything. His place in the family, his relationships, 11 years of his niece's life. He could not make her choice. He could not rush it. He could only build the conditions and wait and trust, with the specific and patient faith of someone who has loved a person from a distance for a very long time, that when the moment came, she would choose right. Just like Dae-hyun had waited. Both of them. Waiting for her. Not to rescue her, not to decide for her. To be present and ready for the version of Adisa that had always existed underneath the obligation and the payments and the carefully managed 5-minute crying sessions in December parking lots. She sits with this for a long time. Then she picks up her phone and types one word to her uncle. When? His reply comes in seconds, as if he has been holding his phone, waiting for 11 years. Whenever you're ready. I have been ready for 30 years. Adisa sets the phone down. She looks at her packed bag by the door. She looks at her kitchen, the one that is hers alone, that smells like the tea she makes when something is sitting in her chest, that has never once been used to feed people who didn't see her. For the first time in as long as she can remember, she is not calculating anything. She is just sitting in the quiet of a life that is about to begin. 3 months later, Atlanta. She chose it deliberately, a city where the Balogun name is not a currency, where her history has no credit or debt, where she is only and exactly what she builds from this point forward. Her apartment is on the 14th floor, high ceilings, a kitchen with a window that faces east so that the mornings come in gold and unhurried. Her name is on the lease, only hers. She had the building manager read it back to her on the phone when she signed it because she wanted to hear how it sounded with nothing attached to it. It sounded like enough. She is the CFO of a private equity firm, a role that came to her through a connection she traced back to Dae-hyun the way she traces everything, quietly and without needing it confirmed. He never mentioned it. She never asked him to. That is the language they have built between them. Precise, unspoken, founded on the understanding that some things don't need to be said aloud to be completely known. The Baloguns are mid-audit. David has retained counsel and is cooperating with investigators in the measured, self-preserving way of a man who has always understood which way the wind was blowing. Her father has called 9 times, her mother 4. She has not answered. Not from anger, which surprised her when she noticed its absence, but from something simpler and more final. She has nothing left to say. The chapter is not painful. It is closed. Uncle John came to Atlanta 6 weeks ago. They sat in her kitchen for 4 hours and he told her things about her father, about the family, about the years before she was born, that rearranged her understanding of her own story the way a key rearranges a lock. It was not comfortable. Some of it was devastating. But it was true, and she has learned, at real cost, that she would rather hold a difficult truth in both hands than carry a comfortable fiction in her chest for 30 more years. She is sleeping through the night now. That is new. That is so new that the first time she woke up at 7 a.m., having slept uninterrupted for 8 hours, she lay in bed for 5 full minutes, not understanding what was different. It is the absence of the low hum she had lived with for so long she had stopped hearing it. The constant background frequency of everything she owed, everyone she hadn't fixed yet, all the ways she might still be failing the people who had never once asked how she was. It is gone. The silence it left behind is the most expensive thing she has ever owned. On a Thursday afternoon, Dae-hyun comes. He brings coffee from a small roastery on the West Loop she mentioned once 8 months ago, in the middle of a different conversation about something else entirely, offhand, the kind of detail you offer without expecting anyone to carry it. She had not expected him to carry it. She is slowly, imperfectly, learning to stop being surprised by what he carries. He sits across from her at her table, not at the head, not beside her, across, level, deliberate, his eyes on her face the way they were that first night in the West Loop. Fully present, steady, without performance or agenda. The way he has always looked at her, like she is the most interesting thing in the room, and he is not in any hurry, and he knows she knows it, and neither of them needs to make it into something it isn't yet. Outside the window, Atlanta is doing what Atlanta does, loud and warm and green, even in winter, indifferent and alive, unbothered by the history of anyone sitting 14 floors above its streets. Inside, the coffee is exactly right. She looks at him, this man who stood when she walked into a room, who left a card with no name and waited 2 days for her to call, who built nothing from her pain, who asked for nothing in return except the version of her that had finally decided she was worth showing up for, who waited 6 months and never once pushed, and understood, without being told, that some arrivals cannot be rushed. She thinks about a timer set in a December parking lot, a pen placed on a desk, a message from an uncle who loved her from 11 years away and trusted her enough not to rescue her. She thinks about how far she has walked to get to this table, this light, this name on this lease, this silence that costs nothing and contains everything. She picks up her coffee. "So," she says. He raises an eyebrow, just slightly, the way he does when he is interested and wants her to know it without making a declaration of it. "What do we build next?" The corner of his mouth moves, not quite a smile, the thing that lives just before a smile in a man who has learned to be careful with them because he knows they mean something. "Whatever you want," he says. A beat. "I'll be here." She looks at him for a long moment. Then she picks up her coffee. She takes a sip. She looks out at Atlanta. And for the first time in 10 years, Adisa Balogun is not waiting for something to go wrong. Adisa got her crown, and the most powerful thing about it? Nobody handed it to her. Not even the men who loved her enough to wait. She built it herself, one decision at a time, starting with the decision to stop being someone else's tool and become her own foundation. If this story found you at the right moment, if you heard something in it that sounded like your own life, you already know why. Subscribe to Christy J's story and click the video on screen right now. I'll see you in the next one.